My guest today is Cindi Carter, the Global Chief Information Security Officer for the Americas for Check Point Software Technologies. Cindi, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. For much of the last decade, cybersecurity experts have warned that the government's struggle to keep up with the volume, velocity, and veracity of cybersecurity data could result in grave consequences. But along comes advances in artificial intelligence over the last few years, and there's hope for organizations to do more to get more in front of those cyber threats. In fact, IDC Government Insights says where AI is making an impact today is through intelligent automation. The research firm says there's still risks associated with relying on AI for cybersecurity, but the value is being demonstrated in its ability to improve threat detection, automate security tasks, and improve security risk analysis. And in fact, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, for example, outlined 12 AI use cases, many of which would apply these capabilities to areas like vulnerability reporting, threat intelligence feed correlation, and advanced network anomaly alerting. The ultimate goal of applying AI capabilities is to enhance cybersecurity efficiency and accuracy for network defenders. So for what leaders need to keep in mind as they consider applying AI tools to their cyber defenses, we turn to Cindi Carter from Check Point Software Technologies. Now, Cindi, CISOs need to evaluate these AI tools. They need to really say, okay, where does it fit? What are some of those considerations? What should they be keeping in mind?
Sure. Jason, I think that first and foremost, and this doesn't just apply with artificial intelligence, it applies to any other new technology or new capability that organizations are looking to bring into their business. What problem are we trying to solve? So I know that there's been a lot of excitement around AI, and read how you will, take what you will from the way that social media and other influences help to describe how AI is going to benefit. But we do have to realize that when it comes to cybersecurity, it is not a one size fits all. It's not a silver bullet type of a fix or a solution. We really do have to understand, I'll say that question again, what problem are we trying to solve? And really look at AI as a capability to help augment the defenses that we already have in place, help leverage it for preventative measures. And also, to your point earlier that you mentioned, how do we help our cybersecurity teams do more with less? And what I mean by that is they have less time. They have less talent on the teams. They have less resources available to them. But one thing I do want to throw a bit of caution into is the fact that when we speak of automation and we speak of automating certain processes or certain tasks that could otherwise be considered as perhaps mind-numbing or maybe mundane, when you think about a security operations center and you have a security analyst there looking at the monitors, looking at the blinking lights, as we all like to say, that can get a little bit mind-numbing, a little bit dry. And so automation with AI for automating some of the low-level responses that maybe a security analyst would have to do is an absolute benefit, so that security analyst can go do that other enriching, more critical mind-thinking type work. So hopefully that helps answer some of the question around what can we do about it, what is being done with it.
I hear this a lot, that the first kind of steps into AI is to take care of that mundane, like low skill, low value work. But the question of what problem are we trying to solve with cybersecurity, it feels like there's all the problems, every problem, right? There's never a little bit of problems. It's never one problem. It's always many. Right. So where do you start when you ask that question personally, right, within your own organization?
Sure. Organizations are leveraging AI for lots of different reasons. One of them is getting products to market faster, helping to improve how products are developed, how they're delivered, lots of different things around that market share, market growth. Secondly, operating efficiency. We all know that there are process improvements that we can make across probably every single organization we've ever worked in. I even know, just even personally, I think of processes as, yes, we've maybe always done it this way, but maybe we need to think about a better way that we could do something. And then thirdly, of course, is helping to improve customer service when it comes to, if a customer has a problem and they call in for support. Some of the AI chatbots now can actually ask you, type in the problem that you're experiencing. And there's a knowledge base behind that so that you can perhaps get your problem solved before you have to get routed into a tier 2 or tier 3 level support. So those are the types of enrichment that I think businesses are tackling with AI. And from a cybersecurity team perspective, we do the same thing. If you think of the practice of cybersecurity, we have, like we just talked about, some of those types of tasks that need to be automated. But I want to throw a word of caution out there. We don't want to automate bad processes, right? That would serve nobody well at all. And so when you think about terms of responses, incident responses to perhaps an alert that comes through, and it might be what we would consider a low-level alert, we have to make sure that those processes that we're utilizing manually, that they are working the way that we intended, that they are delivering the results that we want or the desired outcomes, that they are well documented before you can go and put an AI engine or put artificial intelligence around that to respond. So I do think that ways in which the cybersecurity teams can leverage AI is to help enrich the decisions that we have to make around cybersecurity. What types of vulnerabilities are, or what types of rather threats are present in our environment? What kinds of cyber criminals are attacking our vertical? What types of criminals are interested in the kind of data that we have? Those are the types of enrichment, I call it, that artificial intelligence can help the cybersecurity teams with, and it can help us make better decisions. It can help improve those outcomes for the institutions that we serve.
You made the funny comment about blinking lights. We used to talk about this with cloud, right? Everyone has got to hug their server and see the blinking lights. I think we're starting to get in that same vein with this idea of cybersecurity, that sometimes you can rely on that automation to take care of some of that low-level blinking lights. Are you seeing that change happening? Is that maybe one of the big trends in the cybersecurity community, that there's more comfortability with not having to see every up and down of the data? You can kind of depend on the technology to alert you when there is a big up or a big down?
Yes, it is evolving, and taking a lesson learned from, cloud adoption from what, 10, 12 years ago. I'm actually talking to some organizations now that are moving out of the cloud and back into their on-premises environment in a data center. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. First and foremost, they didn't really understand the problem that they were trying to solve moving to cloud. They did not have a good foundational architectural understanding, enterprise architecture of their environment. And so moving to the cloud in some ways exposed them to even more risk. They also, when you think about the train having already left the station, trying to backpedal through capabilities that maybe the organization adopted too quickly, a little bit more expediently before maybe really thinking about what that underlying architecture looks like, what the data flow looks like. When you move an application into the cloud, or workload as we call it, you have to really step back and do a data flow discussion. Where is the data coming from? Where is it going to? Is it being shared outside of that workload? Is it encrypted at rest in transit? And all of those different other types of cloud configuration parameters that are what are some of the things that organizations have experienced over the last few years, with cloud misconfigurations being the number one reason that they have a compromise. So we don't want to have the same situation happen with artificial intelligence. We need to take a cue. We need to take those lessons learned make sure that we understand the data flow. What type of data are we going to be allowing to be put into that AI engine? We can get into some of that discussion as well. Proprietary intellectual property from our company. Is there going to be customer information from marketing purposes in there? There's all sorts of regulatory and privacy considerations with that, not to mention the ethical and moral use of the data that AI is amassing.
The data question is something that I know the government is struggling with today, and probably will for quite a while, for the reasons you definitely outlined. From a CISO's perspective, and let's maybe take that step back, are there things that their roles, the way their role is changing because of these new technologies, these new things, whether it's AI or really any new type of
Sure.
technology, are there things that they have to keep in mind for themselves?
Well, I think that there's some questions that CISOs need to ask, and these are answers that may not already be clear to us yet, because this space is really still evolving. We need to look internally at our own policies and procedures, things like our DLP practices. Do we have the right data classification? Are we able to, are we adhering to what those existing policies and procedures are? Are we able to look at our acceptable use policy and augment that for the usage of AI in our environment now? Because again, that moral and ethical, making sure that we don't have bias in our data. I'd like to say we may have, this is going to sound old school, but there's the term garbage in, garbage out. So when we consider the kind of data that we could leverage with AI and the kind of training of an LLM to obtain the types of responses that we want, when we have to stop to think about the kind of data that we are going to leverage AI with, we have to make sure that data isn't subject to bias, that we are practicing the ethical and moral use of it, just like our existing DLP policies and procedures do now with the use of data that's not part of an AI conversation. So I think it does cause CISOs and other security leaders to take a step back and make sure, how can we put the right guardrails around the use of this? Because we already know that the business is chomping at the bit. And by the business, I mean, and any of our institutions here. They're chomping at the bit to leverage it because there are significant benefits that can be obtained. But we do have to make sure that we've got the right guardrails and oversight in place. But we also need to make sure that, okay, do we have the right foundation for this to be woven into and built upon?
And I think that's why you're seeing the CISOs, the CIOs, the chief data officers, the chief AI officers now. There's a chief for everybody really kind of coming together, and you're seeing a much better relationship than maybe we've seen when the CIOs, for instance, came into the scene back in the 90s. Cindi, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue our discussion. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. Well, welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Cindi Carter, the Global Chief Information Security Officer for the Americas for Check Point Software Technologies. Cindi, before break, we were talking about the changes of kind of the role of the CISO. And in many ways, you talked about this need to ensure that there are clear guidelines, some good guardrails, understand risk management frameworks around AI specifically, ensure data classifications, policies, and procedures. All of this is very heavy in data. All this heavy is understanding risks. This is not necessarily new for CISOs, but it is new in some ways in terms of how they need to coordinate more specifically with CDOs, CIOs, others. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing around security leadership and how that continues to evolve.
Sure, Jason. Thank you. So I do think, when you think about not even a decade ago, right, cybersecurity was still even an emerging concept that few organizations, institutions really, were either well versed or even concerned with. But when the Target breach happened in 2013, that was a watershed moment that really put cybersecurity front and center, right? I mean, that was just 10 years ago. So when we look at, whether it's corporate America, whether it's our government institutions, the CISO role is now starting to evolve. We can't go a day without talking about the dangers of cybercrime now, right? I mean, I think in everyday conversation, you can even just pick up your phone and look at one of your news feeds, and there's going to be something in there about cybersecurity, about a cyber attack, you name it. So, the business has changed, of course. Technology develops and executes at a much more rapid pace, even than it did 10 years ago. You think about how fast technology changes. Look at some of the vehicles that people drive nowadays. I mean, 5 years ago, would we have really ever been thinking that a self-driving car was going to become a reality? So when you think about how quickly technology evolves and the fact that many organizations may not have even had a formal security leader role in their company, let alone a CISO or CISO, you have to start thinking about the types of maybe legacy systems, some of the areas of vulnerability that might not have even been readily apparent for those leaders to step into. So that in and of itself is something where not only does the CISO have to have some awareness, at least, of technological capabilities, and they may not have grown up, I guess, if you say, in IT. They may not have been a software developer. They may not have been a network engineer, but now they are actually speaking more in terms of the business itself. And I use the term the business very loosely here. But when you think about what's from our educational institutions, right? We are educating the children in the United States to understand math, science, art, languages. The things that go into an educational institution have been tried and true for years, but technologies, with as quickly as they change, leaves us in sort of that catch-up mode, is the point I'm trying to make. And so the impact to that of what CISOs are expected to do, being that expert in technology, to be able to answer that question on a dime. Well, what does this new technology mean for our organization? We have to be able to come up to speed very quickly, and or surround ourselves with folks that can help us understand what that technological capability could mean to our organization. And then we have to be able to have those conversations across our institutions about what that technological advancement, what that cybersecurity threat means in, I'll say, business terms. In other words, in non-technical terms. I'm not going to lead a conversation with our C-suite about an IDS, an intrusion detection system. What I am going to lead with is what problem the intrusion detection system and the other capabilities around us help solve and prevent cybercrime from happening in our organization. So those are some of the types of things. Those are some of the types of skill sets that I think CISOs that have been part of their organizations or been part of cybersecurity now for, let's just even say easily the last 10 to 15 years, where we were very tactically focused, where we were very technologically focused. We now have to have those other core skill sets of communication and being able to translate technical details in a more common language. And by language, I mean, simpler terms, more day-to-day terms for people to understand, why is this cybersecurity concept or this cybersecurity threat or this cybersecurity protection that we're doing in the organization, why is it important to us? Why do we need to use this? And so it's very much all about people and communication, just as much as it really is about what we traditionally think of cybersecurity and the technologies and capabilities that are wrapped around it.
It's interesting you bring up this idea that CISO is now being thrust into this. What does it mean for the business? Talk about the threat or the technology in business terms. We heard very much the same thing that CIOs are thrust into this many, many years ago. We would think the assumption would be, well, we are all impacted by cybersecurity. How much more do they need to tell the business side? But do you see, or do you think that the business side and the cyber side still have some obstacles to overcome to understand the threat? Or is it much easier now? It doesn't mean the CISO shouldn't talk about the threat, but is it easier now than it ever was because of, you mentioned Target, we could highlight dozens of others that have affected all of us over the last decade.
Well, so I think again to talk about the way that we talk about cybersecurity, right? To those, CIOs, CTOs, CFOs, think in terms of that level of the C-suite, right? The role of a CFO has probably been around for, I dare to say, what, 50 to 100 years, right? Many organizations, whether it was called a CFO at the time, but those folks already have a common language that they understand. They understand EBITDA. They understand, they understand financial risk. They understand assets. They understand liabilities. So just as they all have their own natural language that they communicate amongst each other with, cybersecurity professionals come with a whole different set of terms and um, language, if you will, that may be second nature to some of us, because if we've been in this for the last 10 or 15 years, we understand what those terms mean, how to communicate them. We may not understand all of the devil in the details around them, because as I mentioned, as quickly as technology develops, I actually was at a conference a few weeks ago um, for it was state and local education. And I asked the CISOs in the room, I said, how many of you are AI experts? And of course, none of them raised their hand, because we're just not yet. But somehow I think that there's an expectation that instantly the security leader, the CISO, is an expert in that technology, in that capability. So, I'll tie that back to what we discussed before. Our roles are extremely dynamic as security leaders. And, one of the reasons is because of how quickly technological advances take place and how quickly organizations look to implement them. So you have to be comfortable with that amount of rapid pace change. And I talk to a lot of folks that they're comfortable with change, but the pace of change now is increasing so much that it's starting to put people in uncomfortable places. And so as a CISO, as a security leader, and I will say I still am a security practitioner, you have to be continuously hungry to learn something new and evolve with that. So just as technology is evolving and just as the cyber threats are evolving, we have to be willing to embrace that as well as cybersecurity leaders and help our organizations understand that too. We
And in
need
fact,
to.
there's an opportunity coming up just that you're going to be part of, that is going to bring in some federal executives to take advantage of that education. You just want to, we have about a minute left. You want to just give a quick
Sure.
plug?
Yes, the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, or NICE as it's called. That event is taking place in June, and I will be attending that. And these are exactly some of the kinds of conversations that we will be having, in addition to helping those who may be interested in a career in cybersecurity or who may already be in cybersecurity, but looking for other ways that they can enrich their knowledge, maybe look at different roles within cybersecurity. That conference is all about that. And it is absolutely one of the ways that we are going to enrich the skill set that we have in cybersecurity. We do have a shortage of practitioners, so we need more of that. Federal and state government needs that. Healthcare needs that. Every organization across the world needs to have better cybersecurity skill sets. When you think in terms of the leverage that the cyber attackers have because of how their business model operates, they are getting funded. I don't know if we want to include this or not, so feel free to leave it out, but paying ransomware is funding those operations. And think about how if instead of paying the ransomware, if we took that type of investment and put it into our own institutions to help support cybersecurity.
I think your point is really well said, because it's very difficult to get people to understand the negative. Well, if we
Mhm.
do this and we stop it, well, how do you know this will stop it? Well, if you don't do this and you have it, that cost will be way up. And getting
Right.
folks, the business side, to understand that's always been I think, a difficult thing when it comes to cybersecurity. Cindi, unfortunately, we're out of time. I very much enjoyed our conversation, but we are out of time for today. So let me thank my guest. Cindi Carter is the Global Chief Information Security Officer for the Americas for Checkpoint Software Technologies. Cindi, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you again for having me, and be safe out there.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. For more in this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.